Hello everyone, and welcome to episode number lucky 13. And we're getting close to actually doing some cutting and shaping and moving right along. And I've even got a punch list for this video. It might be pretty ambitious to get into one, but the next step, we're going to show cutting, the actual cutting out of the sections of the fuselage. Then I'll talk a little bit about bonding, the types of glues that you can use, and there are several. You don't need any really special stuff. That's my neighbor's dog barking in the background. We'll get into how the segments are aligned and stacked up and bonded together. Then we'll talk about sanding and sanding tools and what we're going to use to shape the foam or put the final shape to the foam fuselage. And last but not least, if we can get to it in this episode, we'll do the fuselage cutouts for the wing saddle, the hatch, and the horizontal stabilizer. Perhaps that's a little too ambitious. Just have to see. Well, let's get started, and I promise I won't run this one too long. Okay guys, we're going to move on into the cutting. And to do that, we're only going to use two tools today. The first, I've shown both on my earlier tools video. The first is this little handmade lightweight wood with spring steel arms. I'll show my hand here. This is about 1 hand span in width. It's small and lightweight. Lightweight being the key here. The other tool, also shown in the earlier video, is the Styro Cutter Plus wand, and this wand will be used to drive through the center of some of these to cut out the hollowed portion. So this for the outside, this for the inside. But before we ever make the first cut, there's one thing that you need to adjust when you're talking about hot wire tools. Now I'm going to turn my hot wire temperature up to about the temperature that I use for all the foam slicing, because that can go fairly quickly. It's a mechanical process that just rides down the rails of my board slicer. However, you don't want the wire to be so hot, I'll take a piece of scrap here, that it just this is way too hot, okay? That just sailed through there. There was almost no resistance at all. There was no feel to the cut. Now, of course, it cut it, but you can't feel it cutting. It just goes right through like you're moving through air. That makes it extremely difficult to control the cuts as you go around the side of your templates. Plus, it melts away too large of a nerf and actually shrinks the size of the foam segments. So I'm going to turn this down to a known good value for this particular tool, and that'll be about 2.2 amps. Your tool, of course, if it has a longer or shorter wire, will require either more or less current to do the same thing. But now when I touch the foam, there's some resistance. I can actually feel the wire being pushed through. There we go. It didn't just fall through. I had to actually kind of put a little bit of pressure on it, and there we go. It's cutting slower, which gives you much more control. There. That's a key point that a lot of the guys that I've shown this technique to personally, they're wondering why they're going wrong or why it's so hard to follow this outline, and it's not. You just got to have the temperature of the wire right so that you can actually feel it. The wire is going to have to rest two different places. It's going to have to rest on this edge and this edge simultaneously. The other thing that you need to try to do is you're not going to do this all in one whack. We don't need these outer shells, or I don't. I guess someone might have a technique where they keep them, but not me. So the outer foam is just waste. And I very seldom cut more than a quarter of a circle or a fuselage segment at a time. That, again, it's a matter of control. If you're onto a long natural curve, maybe you can cut more. If you're onto something short and convoluted, maybe less. But let's go ahead and make the first cut right now. I'm going to start at the top. That's arbitrary too. And again, the wire is slow enough so that you can feel it cut through this. Go down till you feel it hit both the front and the back. And you can see how slow the wire is moving. It won't move any faster than that because it's not hot enough to just zip through it. And then we'll exit. Okay, now you can look, the wire came up here off the back. That's no killer. All you got to do is repeat that cut, making sure that you've got the wire down in the back now. And it's even easier because you can see now that little minute amount of foam came off. No problem. And you can see here, this is going, whoops, hold on, my clip just fell off. Okay, back again. I pushed it off with my hand. But as I was saying, the little bumps here on the back came off nicely. And let me get this up here where you can see the cut. I don't know, let me focus on that. Now this little bulge here is going to come off just like that last one that I showed you. The cut is very, very smooth and it's even around. So now, again, I start back here to the point where I wanted to take that small amount off. Let the wire ride on the tag board and continue cutting around. And you don't even have to do a quarter of a turn. And see how I'm having to let this go slowly through here? That's good. You don't want it to just zip through. Nice clean cuts. Don't worry about a little bit of lines. If you keep the wire moving, you won't melt lines into your foam. Again, rest the wire front and back on the foam and cut around. Now I'm having to pull it because I've got the temperature turned down so that it's not just melting away the foam instantly. There we go. Now that came up off of the back a lot, but again, that's no big deal because all you have to do now that you can see the back, is run the wire over it again. And because our wire is not super hot, it's not going to increase the kerf enough to be of any problems. And you can get these very, very thin slices. They just come right off. And match up the two surfaces. And here we go. We'll continue on around. It's actually harder to keep the wire on the two surfaces of these thin cuts than it will be when we're dealing with the thicker foam segments. These thinner segments, the wire tends to teeter-totter a little bit, and that just makes it a little more difficult. Just have to kind of pay attention to what you're doing and come on around. Again, little micro thin slices can be taken off, that's no problem. And when you're done, you've got a foam fuselage segment all cut out. Here's F1 to F2. That segment of the fuselage now is done. So now to move on to the next one, there's a couple of things you got to do. I'm going to pause this for just a moment, get set up for the next cut. In my haste to do this, I almost screwed up. Remember, I spoke at length about our alignment marks here on all of the axes. Take a fine tip Sharpie now. Fine tip. You want these marks to be accurate. Now you've got to transfer these marks that are on the template to the foam segment that you just cut out. Like I said, in my haste, I almost pulled these templates off the foam before marking it out, and that would have been bad. You need these alignment marks. They are critical. Otherwise, we're not going to be able to stack these things properly, okay? So don't make the mistake that I almost made. So transfer your marks onto the side of the foam, okay? Got to have them out there. Right here, right here. Just a tick mark is all you need. Don't need a big line right now, but just a tick mark at each site. And also, well, while I'm talking about marking them, after you pull after you pulled the individual segments off, let me find my pen again, make sure before you go any further that you mark which face of each of the cutouts is what. This is F2, the other side is F1. So now I'm going to go on the face and mark it F2. This side was F1. All right, and I keep the alignment vertical. That's why you write on it in the same orientation that you cut it. So here's F2 and F1 on that side. So now we're ready to move on to the next foam segment. Now, as I said, we've done the first segment. Here's the F1 side and here's the F2 side. Now take your segments and stack them somewhere, but you need to stack them in order, of course. F1 will be first, F2 will be up. So I'll just set that aside for right now. Now, we have to reuse, of course, the F2 template because that's going to be the face of the next section. It was the back of this section. It's going to be the face of this section. So it's stuck back on here. Additionally, here is F3, and this is going to be one of our first cutout segments. However, it's not going to be cut out of this one. This F3 cutout is going to be on the next one. So we're just going to use this circle for right now. And again, back to our tools. Just enough drag so that we can feel how it goes through the foam. And you're going to end up with a ton of this. I've got a trash can down here. You're going to end up with a lot of waste. And again, I'm having to kind of pull it through because the wire is at a temperature where it's not just falling through the foam. And I'll clean up that back side. just shaving off micro thin slices that didn't come off before. One of the reasons that those micro thin slices are even appearing on this is because these thinner foam segments are actually harder to do than the thicker ones, because you don't have as much of a span for the hot wire to ride upon. And there we go. Finish this one up. That'll just brush off when I get done. After I do this one, I'll do one more on camera, and that will be the one where we start hollowing out the center. And after that, I'll speed things up so that you don't have to watch all of this, which is probably somewhat boring. The main takeaway from what I'm doing right now is emphasizing how important it is to have the proper wire temperature so that you can control what's going on. Okay, I'm going to do another mark out, again marking out each one of these 4 axes on the side of the foam. Don't pull your templates until you do that. Then mark your faces. All right, let me pause while I do that. All right, now we have F2, and get rid of some of that. We've got F2, F3 sides marked, and of course the F2 side now is going to marry the F2 side there. So stack them in order and keep the fuselage former numbers correct. So there's our first 2. Now we're going into, I laid aside template F2. It's done its job now. It's marked the back of the first section and the front of the second. Now we have to use F3 again because it's now the back of the next section, and F4 will be the front. Let me attach these and we will get to the first cutout former. Okay, back again. It's actually taking me longer to attach these templates to the foam than it is to actually cut the thing out, because once again I cannot stress this enough. You've got to have your alignment marks correct. They've got to be dead on your alignment marks. So now we've got F3 on one side, F4 on the other. We'll start cutting it out, and then we'll punch out the center. Do the center last. And this one's tall. You're going to have a large angular difference here between this and the next. That can be difficult sometimes for folks that have not done this much, but the usual way to do that is to try to outline the larger and then come back and follow the smaller. We'll do whatever it takes. Because the wire is not so super hot, we can come back over some of these cuts without really deforming the layer of foam underneath it. If the wire was super hot, every time we pass over this, it would melt away a little bit more of our foam. We don't want that. Okay? And again, this is an easier cut to keep on the templates, mainly because it's wider and it gives you more room, and you're not rocking horse back and forth like a seesaw. And again, you can take off super fine cuts. Don't worry about any ridges that might appear, because you're going to see just how fast they disappear later. If you get some ridges in your cut, don't worry about it. I've done this a lot, and I still get ridges. So, as I said, don't worry. We're going to get there very quickly. And now we're coming up to that big angular difference, which I'm going to take a look at here. Cut that off. And there we're starting up the edge of the canopy. Okay, got a little lump there, comes right off. And that would have been just as easy to take off sanding when we do that. Now we want to stay, you don't want to get this way. You don't want to start the leading edge of your wire on one without it being on the other. You would like to stay as perpendicular as possible, and that's what I'm going to try to do here as we go up the back and down the front. And as I said, keep the wire on the back and just let the front do its thing the first time. As you can see, we got a big lump there. It doesn't matter. We're going to come back now because now we can see where we're going and what we're doing. And we're going to run that around again. Now, I should have foreseen this. Because of the huge angular difference here, I just ran into this pin. Again, no big deal. We're working with foam here, and as I show you when we begin shaping it a little bit later, any irregularities that you've got in it now are going to come right off. Now again, I'm trying to follow the back instead of the front. When you cut around these, pick the side that it's harder for you to follow. Now, got that big lump in the front because we didn't follow the front, but that big lump is about to disappear. And there it goes. So follow whichever curve is the more difficult for you to follow, and let the other one just run out, because it's so easy to just come back in there once you can see both of the templates. It's so easy to come back now after the fact and make a nice smooth cut. Now I got off back here again. Again, that doesn't matter. All we do, lay the wire on that back template and keep going. Trying to hold this up in the air here. It's really closer to my face than I usually use it, but I want to make sure everything's in frame. Okay, there we go, and you can see how thin a slice you can take off there. I mean, it's just really thin. All right, now we're going to take one more look. Yeah, we got a lot of big bulge back there, but that big bulge is about to disappear. There's the bulge. Goes in the bin. And now we have gotten our outside cuts all done. All of the little bulges have been taken care of. It's looking good. What we want to do now, I'm going to turn off my little handheld bow here, and I'm going to turn on this wand. Now this is going to take a moment to heat up. So while this is heating, I'll go ahead and pause the video. Okay, that really only took a moment. This is a great little tool. After I purchased this, I was looking at where they could be gotten by folks that might not have a Michael store handy, and I found out that they're available on Amazon and a couple of other places. And I read the reviews on Amazon, and some of the reviewers on there saying, oh, it doesn't cut, oh, it bends. Well, what they're doing is they're trying to force this thing through foam as if it were a knife, and it's not. It's a hot wire, and it is set to a certain temperature. And it's going to cut as fast as it's going to cut, and no faster. If you try to force this, you're going to bend it. That's just a little flimsy heater element there. So in order to get our inside cut out, just make sure that you're going to pass it directly through the foam somewhere, doesn't matter. And again, I'm not forcing this. Let it cut its own speed. Now I'm through. Now I can just turn this loose until it comes up here and starts riding on the templates. And I'm going to just let that cut at its own speed. I'm not going to force it. If I had some way just to do this by gravity, I would do that. Just let it ride around. Let it cut at its own speed, which is nice and slow. I prefer this one, this wand, to the other heavier duty wand that I have that I think I found on some Chinese site somewhere. Okay, now we're to this corner, and you just let it hang there. We're cutting inside, so overcuts don't really matter. And now I'm going to let gravity just ride it across the flat part of the cut. And again, there's no force involved here. Let the wire assume its own speed. If you try to push it, all you're going to do is bend it. Okay? Now we're there. Now we're just going to start coming on around our curve. Okay, I felt that release. Now we're done. And we're going to pull this out. It's, whoo, I tilted it. No wonder it's not wanting to come out. Now, these will want to come out whichever side is larger, and it just so happens that it's this side. So whichever side you've got that's larger, go ahead and pull it on out. But that's what you're left with, is that core. Throw it away. It's no good. And now, again, if you have any overruns like I did here, very easy to take care of, although on the inside they don't matter. And there we go. Now, let me see if I can show you a little bit closer how nice and smooth that takes out that core. Hope you can see that. I guess it's focusing on it. Let's see. There we go. Nice, smooth core cut out. And because it's a wand and it's just pokes through, you don't have to worry about drilling a hole, passing a wire through, and hooking up a bow like this. It can all be done from one side. That makes a tremendous difference. And these are cheap as chips, so get you one. When you use it, don't force it. Let it do its cut at its own speed, and you'll love it. All right, that completes F3 and F4 templates. And as you can see, whoops, I dropped it. Oh well, as you can see, I was saying, now we've gotten the first of the sections with a cutout, and you can see how easy that was with that little wand tool. Now I'm going to continue because I've got a lot more of these things to do than you do, since I'm doing it for two separate fuselages. I'll continue this off camera, and then we'll get back and we'll talk about how to bond these things together. Well, I will be showing how to bond these things together. However, not in this video because, as usual, my idea of a punch list to get things done in this one was wildly optimistic. We did get the cutting done, but we're going to start talking about bonding and the other stuff in the next video, just to keep this at some reasonable length, okay? All right, well, if you've hung around this far, you'll probably show up for the next one, so see you then.